3 cars blocked a canal in the United States. In order to prevent the irrigation from being affected, the management decided to send someone to remove the cars. However, after 2 divers went down, they never came back up. Subsequently, 2 more divers were sent down to rescue them, but they also failed to surface. Then, a 3rd group of 2 divers went down to recover the cars, and what they saw next was shocking. This is not a fairy tale. This is a real incident that occurred in the United States at the Roza Canal. In the southern part of Washington, there is a small town called Zillah, which belongs to Yakima County. The town is surrounded by large farmlands and vineyards. To irrigate these crops, the local government constructed 7 underground tunnels, also known as Hongxi pipes, to divert water from nearby Zillah Canal and Roza Canal into the fields. However, not only farmers liked these canals, but also car thieves. To avoid police inspections, they often threw stolen cars into the canal, and these cars would be carried along the water flow into the Hongxi pipes, causing blockages in the waterway. As a result, the local authorities would clear the cars from the pipes once every year before irrigation. On March 14, 1997, 3 cars were discovered in the Hongxi pipe near the Roza irrigation area. In order not to disrupt the irrigation process 2 weeks later, the Roza irrigation area decided to remove all 3 cars. The Hongxi pipe is about 673 meters long and reaches a depth of 31.7 meters, with a diameter of about 2 meters, crossing over a road. The tunnel uses the Hongxi effect to channel water into the farmland and has an inverted trapezoidal shape. 2 divers were hired, 33-year-old Marty Rode and 41-year-old John Eberly. Both had received recreational diving training, which did not qualify them for commercial diving work. However, due to their previous experience with irrigation canals and the high cost of hiring commercial diving teams, the authorities overlooked the issue. At the time, the temperature was still quite low in March, and the water outlet at one end of the canal was even frozen. Around 10 a.m., the 2 divers broke through the ice and went in. They didn't carry ropes but had a thin steel cable. According to the plan, they would swim to the cars, attach the steel cable to the bumpers, and pull the cars out once they returned to the surface. The method was simple, and the tunnel was not very long, so each diver only carried 1 air tank. The air in the tank was expected to last for an hour, and they planned to spend around 40 minutes underwater, with one of them carrying a small emergency air tank. The equipment seemed to be fine, and they followed the plan, reaching the cars and successfully attaching the cable to the bumper. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, and in about 10 minutes, they would be back at the surface. However, they suddenly realized that the air in their tanks was running out. The 2 divers panicked and immediately turned around to swim back to the exit, but the air ran out before they could go far. They shared the emergency air tank, but to their surprise, that tank also quickly emptied. Since they did not have communication equipment, the people on the shore had no idea what was happening. Eventually, both divers drowned. More than 50 minutes passed, and since they had not surfaced, the situation was realized. They immediately called 911 for help. The next morning, firefighters found the divers, who were also firefighters, to carry out the rescue, although it would be more accurate to say it was a retrieval operation. The divers were 34-year-old Rusty Hauber and 37-year-old Charlie Mestaz. Like the previous 2, they had only received recreational diving training and had little experience with the Hongxi pipe. When they were notified, Hauber hesitated at first, but eventually decided to go, even though he had been denied leave. Hauber and Mestaz were the ones sent to rescue, with 2 others providing support from the outside. They carried an air tank that would last about an hour, and Mestaz also brought a small emergency tank, which was similar to the equipment used by the previous divers. The plan was to retrieve the bodies and bring them back to the surface, expecting the operation to take around half an hour. At the 20-minute mark, they found the bodies of the previous divers and began pulling them out. As they were about to leave, they checked their dive meters and were shocked to see that their air supply would last only another 10 minutes. This situation was identical to what had happened with the previous divers. They abandoned the bodies and swam out in panic, but Hauber's air tank ran out first. Mestas shared his emergency tank with him. A few minutes later, the two support divers noticed the lack of bubbles on the water's surface and immediately jumped in to investigate. About 10 minutes later, they found Hauber and Mestas just 61 meters from the exit. Hauber was motionless, and his regulator had fallen from his mouth. Mestas still had his regulator, but he had lost the ability to move. The support divers quickly dragged them towards the exit. After reaching the surface, the emergency phone call was made, and attempts to revive them were carried out. Unfortunately, Hauber had no vital signs. He was later confirmed dead. Mestas was taken to the hospital but remained in a coma for 3 days before passing away. The authorities checked their equipment and found no leaks, and the air mix was normal, but the tanks were empty. On the same day that Mestas passed away, the Zilla city government drained the Hongxi pipe, and the bodies of the first 2 divers were found. Their equipment was also intact, but their tanks were empty. The police were surprised to find that the 3 cars were actually closer to the eastern section of the canal, where it would have been much easier to retrieve them. But for some reason, the authorities insisted on dealing with it from the irrigation side, which might have been due to poor equipment access. The biggest question surrounding this incident was, if the air tanks were supposed to last an hour, why did they all run out after just half an hour? Cave diving experts quickly provided an answer. The divers had consumed the air too quickly. The main reasons were fourfold. First, the cold water increased air consumption. Second, underwater work consumes air faster than recreational diving. Third, the depth of the dive affected air consumption, with deeper dives using more air. And fourth, once they realized they were running low on air, their panic made them swim faster, accelerating air consumption. Essentially, the divers should have prepared for at least 90 minutes or 2 hours of air, but they were unaware of this due to their lack of technical diving knowledge. In other words, the Roza irrigation area should have hired commercial divers, not recreational ones, to handle the task. Commercial diving is a form of technical diving. After the accident, the Roza irrigation area was fined $37,900 for violating 10 safety regulations from the U.S. Department of Labor. Hauber's wife later sued the Yajima Fire Department and the local government, citing multiple issues, with the primary one being that Hauber should not have been sent. However, the court dismissed her lawsuit as the local government had immunity, and Hauber had been sent as a firefighter, not as a diver, so the fire department was not held liable. With that, the incident was concluded, and this video has come to an end. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.